You smell it before you understand what it is. Something is burning. Not the sharp panic of a forest fire, not the acrid sting of a lightning-struck tree. Something else, something warmer, something that makes your mouth fill with saliva before your brain has any idea why. For roughly 300,000 years, possibly longer, your ancestors lived inside that moment. The moment before fire became a tool, before cooking became a choice, before the first meal was ever placed deliberately into a flame. And what happened next changed the shape of your skull, the size of your brain, and the entire trajectory of what it means to be human. But it did not look anything like you imagine. Here's what most people picture when they think of the first cooked meal. A wise, upright, early human crouching beside a campfire, carefully roasting a leg of meat on a stick, nodding with quiet satisfaction at the discovery. A eureka moment, a conscious invention. That is almost certainly not what happened. Richard Wrangham, the Harvard primatologist and author of Catching Fire, How Cooking Made Us Human, has spent decades arguing that cooking is not merely a cultural achievement, it is a biological one. His hypothesis, now supported by substantial fossil evidence, is that cooking did not come after humans became human. Cooking is part of the reason we became human at all. The story begins not with Homo sapiens, not even with Homo erectus at the point most textbooks begin. It begins earlier, in the aftermath of a natural disaster your ancestors did not choose and did not control. A wildfire. Imagine you are Homo erectus, walking an ancient African landscape roughly 1.5 to 1.8 million years ago. You are not fully modern. Your forehead is lower, your brow ridge heavier, your gut significantly larger. You eat raw food, tubers, fruit, leaves, the occasional raw meat from a scavenged carcass. Digesting it takes enormous energy. Your digestive system is a metabolic furnace that runs constantly, burning calories just to break down tough plant fibers and unprocessed proteins. Then fire comes across the grassland. You do not run immediately. Your group retreats to a safe distance, watching. And when the fire passes, when the smoke thins and the smoldering grass cools, something happens that no primate had likely ever experienced before. The smell. Animals that died in the fire. Tubers that roasted in the superheated soil. Seeds that cracked open in the heat. Your ancestors approached cautiously, as modern primates do today after wildfires, and they ate. And what they ate was categorically different from anything they had consumed before. Cooked food is not simply raw food that is hot. Cooking breaks down the cell walls of plant matter, making starches gelatinize and proteins denature, which means they unfold and become dramatically easier for your digestive system to process. A raw sweet potato delivers roughly 35% of its calories to your body. The same potato, cooked, delivers nearly 75%. The food is the same. The caloric yield is almost double. This is what Richard Wrangham calls the cooking hypothesis, and it explains something that has long puzzled paleoanthropologists, scientists who study ancient human fossils. Why did Homo erectus, appearing in the fossil record around 1.9 million years ago, have a dramatically smaller gut, smaller teeth, and a significantly larger brain than the hominins that came before? Smaller teeth mean less chewing work, suggesting softer processed food. Smaller gut means less digestive hardware, suggesting higher quality, easier to process calories. Larger brain means more energy being funneled to the most expensive organ in the human body, a brain that consumes even today roughly 20% of your total caloric intake despite being only 2% of your body weight. The math works, but only if the food got better, and the food only got better if fire was already involved. Archaeological evidence from sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where researchers have found burnt bone and plant ash dating back approximately 1 million years. And more controversially, microevidence from Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, dating to 780,000 years ago, suggests that controlled fire use is very old. Some researchers believe the actual behavior is older still, possibly pushing back to Homo erectus's earliest appearances. But here's the twist, and it is a counterintuitive one. The first cooked meal was almost certainly not a planned event. Your ancestors did not discover fire and then think, I will now cook with this. The archaeological evidence, combined with what we know about the cognitive capacity of early hominins, suggests something far more accidental, far more opportunistic. They ate what the fire left behind, over and over and over again, and their bodies, in over hundreds of thousands of years, began to reflect that shift. This is how evolution actually works. Not a single genius moment, a relentless accumulation of small advantages, compounded across generations. The animals that had slightly smaller guts and slightly larger brains did slightly better when fire-processed food was available. Their children did slightly better. their children's children. Until, across a timeline so long your mind genuinely cannot hold it, the body of Homo erectus was functionally re-engineered around the expectation of cooked food, which means something uncomfortable about you, right now. Paleoanthropologist Leslie Aiello, who developed the expensive tissue hypothesis alongside Peter Wheeler in 1995, demonstrated that there is a direct evolutionary trade-off between gut size and brain size. Maintaining a large, complex digestive system costs enormous energy. As early hominin guts shrank, freed from the burden of processing raw, tough, low-yield food, that energy was redirected, upward, into the brain. Your brain, the one reading these words right now, is the neurological inheritance of a gut that got smaller because fire did part of the digestive work. You are, in the most literal biological sense, a cooking animal. Not because you chose to be, because your ancestors encountered fire, repeatedly ate what it produced, and over vast stretches of geological time, your body rebuilt itself around that encounter. So what did the first cooked meal actually look like? Not a feast. Not a ritual. Almost certainly not meat on a spit. It was probably a scorched tuber, something like a wild yam or corm, partially blackened on the outside, soft and starchy on the inside, pulled from the still warm ground after a natural wildfire had moved through. It was consumed quickly, probably competitively, by a group of hominins who had no concept of what had just happened to them. There was no ceremony, no recognition of discovery, no moment of conscious understanding. Just the smell, just the warmth, just the strange flooding sensation of calories arriving faster and more completely than anything they had ever eaten before. And somewhere in that unremarkable, accidental moment, the long biological ratchet clicked one notch forward. The gut shrank a fraction. The brain grew a fraction. The reliance on fire deepened. Richard Wrangham estimates that without cooking, a modern human trying to sustain their body on a raw diet, actual raw wild food, not the processed raw foods available today, would need to spend roughly 6 hours a day chewing. 6 hours. The simple act of freeing your jaw from that burden gave your ancestors something extraordinary. Time. Time to move farther, to think longer, to talk. Language itself, some researchers believe, expanded more rapidly once early humans gathered around fire in the evenings. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, analyzed decades of recorded conversations among the Juhuanzi San people of the Kalahari, one of the last surviving hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, and found that daytime conversations were almost entirely practical. Resource management, work, disputes. But firelit nighttime conversations were overwhelmingly different. Stories, histories, identities. The social imagination lit up when fire was present. The campfire did not just cook your food, it cooked your culture. And yet, today, you sit in a kitchen, or stand in line at a drive-thru, or heat something in a microwave in 2 minutes. The fire is invisible. Electricity, gas, electromagnetic radiation, but it is still there. Still doing what fire has always done. Still pre-digesting your food before your gut ever touches it. Still giving your brain the energy it needs to do what brains now do. You smelled it before you understood what it was. That is still true. Every time you catch the scent of something cooking, something older than memory pulls your attention toward it, floods your mouth with anticipation, and reminds your body, at a level far below conscious thought, that fire means food, and food means survival. That response is 1.5 million years old at minimum. And it began not with a genius crouching deliberately beside a flame. It began with something much humbler, much more honest, and much more human. It began with hunger, and with a wildfire, and with the smell that made your ancestor move toward the heat instead of away from it. That was the first cooked meal, and it tasted like the future.